the Torah is right, then maybe the relationship's wrong. So I had a choice at that point. I decided to let it go. He knew that I knew, that he knew, that I knew. I don't know what happened to him. Confirmation bias, our expectations, our perceptions. What are we thinking? What are we feeling? What's driving it? And can we be ready for Moshiach with a broader mind, with a little less defensiveness, a little more openness? Here's another slide about science advancing. Very interesting fact, I'm sure many of you have heard about this already, that in order for a bris to take place, you have to do a little surgery, and when you make the cut, there's going to be blood. I'm sorry, ladies, it does happen. And you better have good blood clotting ability. It turns out that the blood clotting ability is primarily due to two chemicals in the blood. One is vitamin K, one is prothrombin. These are the key things in the blood that are blood clotting factors. There are hundreds of chemicals involved, but without these two key factors, garnish health and, God forbid, hemophilia, and you'd even be exempt from a circumcision if you would be a hemophiliac. Dr. Armand Quick wrote several books on the control of bleeding. He says, it hardly seems accidental that the rite of circumcision was postponed until the 8th day by the Mosaic law. Take a look here. That's the 8th day of life, that yellow rectangle. Prothrombin is at its highest peak on the 8th day of life than any time in a human being's life. That's a blood chemical that's just in your system. Vitamin K peaks and then stabilizes at that level, but it takes till 8 days until it gets to the level it needs to be. We had the head of the burn unit at Wellesley Hospital, a Jewish lady who was our Shabbos guest a number of years ago, and she made a comment. She said, how amazing that the ancient Hebrews in Egypt knew about blood clotting and the chemistry of blood clotting way back then. I said, what? What about this? The same God that gave the mitzvah prepared us, and we're just catching up now. Science is catching up to what the faith had embedded in it. Maybe we didn't know. Maybe we didn't have to know. God had to know. He had to tell us what to do. Now we understand it a little better. And understanding is part of the Moshiach story unfolding. Here's another event that happened. Have I gone over time? I haven't done. Should I wind down? Are you okay? Listen, if you want to sleep, just put a few chairs together. There will be plenty of time for questions. And we are most of the way through. So you'll bear with me? Who wants me to wind down right now? You do. Yes, sir. That's it. No more lottery wins for you. Okay, here's a story of Maisa Shahaya, a story that happened in the class. First I'll tell you the story, and then I'll tell you the Torah behind the story. 100 kids in the class. I call up 2 volunteers. I told them I'm going to ask the class. I'm going to ask the class 2 questions: 1 memory question, 1 concentration question, and I want you to note when I ask the questions before they raise their hands and they say they've solved the questions. I want you to note whether the class is, how many people have head down and how many people have head up when they're trying to answer the question. And you do the right side of the class and you do the left side of the class. Random people, I asked for volunteers, I picked them, they came up. Then I asked the memory question. This was a Friday class, what did you have for lunch on Tuesday and with whom did you have it? They had to think about it, they had to write it down. Then I asked, what is 17 times 6? You're not allowed to write this down. Calculate it in your head. When you have the answer, raise your hand. And they made their observations. Then I asked them to report their observations to the class. When they asked the memory questions, most people had head up. When they asked the concentration question, most people had their head down. And then I told them the following story. In Likutei Sichos, there is a story that the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, was at a meal when somebody came in and said that there was a new discovery in neuroscience that had just come up. And they discovered that there's a blood vessel there's a blood vessel at the back of the brain that, depending on its vapor pressure, it changes position. And in one position, it stimulates memory. And the other position, it stimulates concentration. And this is like a tremendous discovery. And the Rebbe, after the meal, went out to the Schneerson Library, the collection of thousands of scholarly tomes, pulled out a slender volume from his great-great-grandfather, the Mittler Rebbe, that talks about this blood vessel. And it says over there that in one position, that in one position it stimulates memory, in another position it stimulates concentration, and the proof of its activity, writes the Mittler Rebbe, when a person wants to concentrate, he lowers his head, and when he wants to remember, he raises his head. That changes the position of that blood vessel and stimulates that mental function. So the guest said, that's astounding. That means the Mittler Rebbe was some kind of a great doctor. And the Rebbe said, Chas v'shalom, he wasn't a doctor. He says, well, how could he know about it? It was just discovered now. He wasn't examining cadavers? He said, no, he wasn't examining cadavers. He was the Rebbe. He didn't examine cadavers. So how could he know about it? Because that's how it is in Adam Kadmon. That's how it is in the spiritual template of man in the higher realms. And because it's that way in the spiritual template, that's why physical people who are built according to that plan have that quality. These people enjoyed it. You know, I have to tell you, there's just a trick how to present it in a secular university that you're not preaching. It was great. It was a very popular course. They worked very hard. But you see science approaching Torah. Here's a Professor Chaim Shur. Oh, log linear graph. Oh, all the eyes are going to roll. But basically what he did is he took the words from the Torah, calculated their numerical value, and then looked at the key properties of the things that have those names. For example, Yareach, Eretz, and Shemesh. Moon, Earth, and Sun. Plotted on a logarithmic scale, it exactly matches their diameters. The diameters of these heavenly bodies are reflected in the numerical values of their Hebrew words. It doesn't work with their English words, but it matches the Hebrew words. And then he did the same thing with day, month, and year on the Hebrew words for them. And they also happened to plot a highly statistically significant straight line graph through a log frequency scale. All of these things, he has a whole book of them, coincidences in the Bible and so on, and ancient and biblical Hebrew, are a reflection. Like, for example, the word harayon for pregnancy has a numerical value of 271, just like the number of days of pregnancy are 271. It's just the way things are. It's God's language, and it works like that. Yeah, but these weren't known before, but now they are. But moving out of the science showing Judaism true perspective and just going into the real world of real scientists, there's a book, fairly recent, Science versus Religion. They interviewed, well, they surveyed, probably using the internet or something with forms, 1,700 professional scientists. Most believe in God. Half of them are religious in the traditional sense. Is that your concept of what a scientist is? It's my concept of what a scientist is. There may be noisy atheists among them, but that's not really what's going on. And among Nobel Prize winners, they're the ones that are not afraid of what people think. They openly declare their faith. And here you see a list, a really, really remarkable list of the biggest names of the last century. So, here's a picture of science as it's evolving. The old science, 19th century science, when all those great things started to take off, it was materialistic, hard-nosed, reductionistic, purely logical. And what was the conclusion? God isn't necessary. It's irrelevant. Human beings, they're just an accidental blip. Life is insignificant. That was the view of science then. The view of science today and I maintain that all these different areas, math, physics, chemistry, on and on and on and on, that whole list, we can pull out threads that are emerging, growing, and progressive, that are building a picture of a modern integrative holism in science that is indicating and often explicitly stating the reality of God, the reality of the soul, and that human life has specific meaning. Is that relevant for a world moving towards God, towards the knowledge of God? I think so. One more thing. Moshiach, oisies, yismach. Joy and the redemption are intimately linked. Moshiach, the Messiah, if you jumble the letters, you get rejoice, will rejoice. One of the things that we realize is that when you have a positive message, you feel happy. When you feel happy, you're that much more potent and powerful to influence the world. Happiness really spreads and works and is impactful to a much greater extent than the opposite of happiness. In fact, there was a meta-analysis of 225 studies that were done in psychological literature over decades. This is not one study. This is like one study, another study. Hundreds of studies reviewed, basically surrounding one question. Does success make you happy? Or is it happiness that creates success? And the conclusion of all of this was that it's happiness that generates success. And faith is something that creates happiness. Faith, ritual. There's a book called The Handbook of Religion and Medicine. Fabulous textbook, huge fat book, 1,200 studies about religion and spirituality, which basically come to tell you that if you are miserable, you're going to have a shorter life, a sicker life, many more problems, psychological and physical ailments. And if you are joyful, you will live longer, you will be more physically healthy, and you'll have more stable relationships, less probability of divorce. You will have a more stable job and higher pay in that job than if you are an unhappy person. Happiness is something to work on. Moshiach awareness is something to work on. It's something that we can do. So what we did is we reviewed, and we saw that the Torah makes a prophecy about Moshiach, and they got a bullseye. It is Zohar's bullseye, is a reality, it's incontrovertible. Yes, this is the story of Moshiach unfolding. So we have to realize that when there are other prophecies that come to us, like the time of your redemption has arrived, behold Moshiach coming, that these things are really real. These are things to be celebrated, and we should be besimcha, and that way be mekabel Moshiach, and we will all really live happily ever after. Okay. The question is, if we're getting that much closer to Mashiach, how do we deal with the birth pangs of Mashiach? How do we deal with those pains, the incredible suffering that seems to be associated with it? It's a question that seems to have the answer built into it. The question, how do we deal with it, implies that we must deal with it. And dealing with it is the best thing to do. There are many ways of dealing with things. We can succumb to chocolate chip cookies. We could succumb to computer games. We could succumb to internet addictions. We could succumb to other addictions. There are many dysfunctional things that we can do while we evade our pain. But the very best way to deal with pain is to realize that the pain is the source of our gain. Without the birth pangs, there is no birth. And there's a concept in life coaching called leaning into your pain. When you acknowledge your pain and focus on it and feel it, it hurts less than when you try to avoid it and it then goes to chase you. I hate to say this because I don't like pain. I like chocolate chip cookies and I like dysfunctional behavior when I'm under pressure. But the healthy way to deal with the pain is to acknowledge it and realize it's a part of the process and to stay positive, focused on your goal. When you ride your bike and you're close to the curb, if you're going to look at the curb, you're going to hit the curb. If you look down the road, you'll drive straight even if you're inches from the curb. We have to drive straight. That's what we have to do. I don't know if it helps. Somebody from the men's side? Sure.
Dr. Stephen Hawking recently announced that with the discovery of the God particle, we no longer need God for creation. How do we answer him?
I don't think he has a question.
Please repeat the question.
Stephen Hawking, with the discovery of the God particle, the Higgs boson, basically says that we no longer need God because we now have a particle that serves that purpose. A particle that mediates between the indivisible wholeness beyond space and time, which is conscious, and physical reality and the masses that have the forces. So now we've got this semi-particle, which is a massless particle that's carrying this energy, and we found it in the big cyclotron in Switzerland, and now we can relax. That there's nobody looking over our shoulder. Not true. Not true. You don't have to answer it. First of all, it's not a question. He wants to be a big shot, and he is. He comes to Waterloo, just like an hour and a half near Toronto over there. A darling of the world. Every time he passes gas, the whole world pays attention. Why would he have a question? Somebody without a question doesn't need an answer. But if you know somebody who's got a problem because of Stephen Hawking, then we'll play with it, because the God particle is only a God particle because it carries information to physical matter. But what gave it that information to carry, and what made it be? Did it create itself? So the question is not a true question. It's just fancy talk to build oneself up. I hate to put him down, but he is smart enough to know better, especially since in earlier books he did acknowledge God. It's just not fashionable anymore for him to do so. Yes?
Yes. Ravana Shalom is a God of testing. Why must the birth pangs be full of so much pain?
I wanted different.
Repeat question.
Our God is a God of kindness. Why did he make so much pain in the process of getting to our personal and collective redemption? I don't know. Yeah?
Okay. I have a question with kind of like two parts. How is it that Jews, the rest of the firm world, has such a hard time accepting the concept of Moshiach when Christians have such an easy time accepting it? And the second part of my question is, how is it that firm Jews don't know that Moshiach originated as a Jewish concept? Why do they insist on saying that Lubavitchers are like Christians, Lahavdil? How is it that firm Jews don't know this?
Fabulous. So the question has two parts. One is, Jews had the concept of Mashiach built right into their religion. Christians got it from Jews. And now Christians have a glorious time with the Messiah, and they just love this whole idea of redemption, and they just live on it. And you tell them the Mashiach is coming, and they're just like, yeah, hallelujah. And we're like, I don't know. And how did that happen? Number one. And number two, the Orthodox Jews are the ones that know the most about the religion, and they're the most antagonistic towards the concept of Mashiach, especially Mashiach now. Fabulous, fabulous question. Somebody greater than me and you together had exactly that question. The Lubavitcher Rebbe. Fascinating thing. 109 years ago, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, we spoke about him before, was addressing, like around the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, the age of enlightenment and reason had gone on, and Marx was on the scene, and all kinds of stuff was happening. Religion was under assault. And he said, there's a process of two yovlos. There's two 50-year periods coming. 50 years of atheism and 50 years of orthodoxy with anti-messianic attitude. And nobody could have people could understand 50 years of atheism. That sounded like a horrible decree, but yeah. But then the world became more sensitive and attuned to spirituality, and people are accepting notions of God all over the place, and it's becoming even popular to talk about it, to celebrate it, and stuff. But Orthodox Jews, anti-Mashiach, so the Rebbe, our Rebbe, said, proof that the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe was a prophet is that nobody could have rationally predicted a full generation or two of Orthodox Jews anti-Mashiach now. It doesn't make any sense. Obviously, he was a prophet. I'm just phrasing I'm saying that your question was shared by him. Now, if I could, I have a second answer. Can I give will you remember your comment? Can you just hold it? I want to give a second answer, not in the voice of a Lubavitcher, but in the voice of Rabbi Yecheskel Lowenstein of Ponevezh, the Or Yecheskel. Familiar with this? Yeah. He writes as follows, and this is a book called Living in the Age of Mashiach, which is also for sale tonight. We have a few left. It's not a new book, but there's a lot of timeless material here. I did. Now, who wrote it? I did. That's the question. That's the answer. Okay. Fundamental belief. He says, the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan explains that belief in the future redemption is part of the belief of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, which is included in the first and foremost of the Ten Commandments in the Torah. When we examine our beliefs concerning this concept, alas, we find that we are quite lacking in the belief in the future redemption. Concerning the belief in God who created heaven and earth, overseeing and conducting creation, we find that at least at times we're involved and we can speak about it. However, when it comes to the belief in the coming of Mashiach and the resurrection of the dead, we shy away from discussing it at all, as if we were ashamed to be connected with the subject. It is not relevant to our daily lives. The words of the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan are to arouse a deep fear trembling in our bones. One of the foremost mitzvahs given by God the Almighty is, I am the Lord your God. Whoever is not totally involved in the complete belief of the redemption and the resurrection of the dead is far from any true belief in God. So if you want to know why, it's because they don't believe in God either. So we have to start at the beginning. We have to start at the beginning. We have to give people an understanding. It could be daddy issues, trust issues. It could be, there's many reasons why somebody cools off. You can't believe, so the comment was you can't believe in God if you don't learn Chassidus. So therefore, we have venues here, right here in Baltimore. There are people here that teach Chassidus. There are probably people in this room that teach Chassidus. There's a Rosh Chodesh gathering. Do you learn Chassidus at those Rosh Chodesh gatherings? These things happen. There's venues available. Definitely plug in. It's certainly a good thing.